Chelsea Hamilton's discovery came at 3:30 on a rain-laced Tuesday, when the archives of a shuttered law firm surrendered a dust-caked microcassette from a forgotten answering machine and detonated the illusion that Madison Montgomery had spent a lifetime cultivating. The tape, grainy yet unmistakably authentic, captured a frantic 15-year-old Madison whisper sobbing to the family's fixer about the slip on the marble stairs, about how father's skull cracked against the antique newel post, about how the coroner must be persuaded to classify the death as misadventure rather than negligence that could dissolve the dynasty overnight. In the breathy hush between admissions, the click of ice in a glass and the muffled scrape of a lighter confirmed the fixer's presence, sealing a conspiracy that had fossilized into legend and, until this moment, remained entombed beneath money, myth, and the granite facade of Richardson House. Chelsea replayed the confession until every hitch in Madison's breath mapped itself onto the labyrinth of her own ambitions. And when she finally rose from the flickering desk lamp to stare down at the skyline, she knew the leverage was not merely explosive, it was sovereign. Madison Montgomery controlled the Richardson Foundation, a philanthropic behemoth that distributed billions yet operated like a monarch's purse. And Chelsea had spent the last decade stranded on its perimeter, begging for scraps of influence while Madison, cloaked in benevolent rhetoric, bent grants and endowments to entrench the Montgomery legacy. Now a single ribbon of magnetic tape threatened to invert that hierarchy. Chelsea drafted the ultimatum in her head before dawn: surrender control of the board, appoint me chief executive, and the recording stays buried. Refuse, and the audio surfaces at the next trustees' gala, unspooling across every newsfeed until even the marble lions outside Richardson Hall learn how your father really died and how you paid to keep the truth embalmed. By Wednesday, the Courier had delivered a silver flash drive and a note: we both know how fragile legacies are. Decide fast. The response arrived in silence, but silence from Madison was never empty. It was the coiling of a cobra beneath silk, a pulse calibrated for maximum psychological incision. Within hours, Chelsea's email lit with board meeting summonses, legal disclaimers, and a chilly invitation to a private supper at the Rosewood Conservatory. Madison chose territory designed to remind visitors of her curatorial power, kids genetically spliced to bloom out of season, violins suspended from invisible wires, waitstaff choreographed like ghosts, but Chelsea walked the marble path like a conquering queen, clutching a second encrypted duplicate of the tape in her handbag and the certainty that one misstep from Madison would torch generations of immaculate branding. The dinner began with civility steeped in arsenic, amuse-bouches of truffled sea urchin, compliments on Chelsea's Telford trench, murmured nostalgia for boarding school spring formals, each pleasantry circling the central blackmail like falcons around carrion. When dessert's gold-leafed pears soaked in cognac appeared, Madison slid a vellum envelope across the table, her smile so polished it seemed soldered to the bone. Inside lay a counteroffer as audacious as it was desperate: co-leadership, immediate access to the foundation's discretionary fund, and a public announcement framing Chelsea as the visionary partner who would shepherd a new era of transparency. Chelsea let the document rest between perfectly aligned forks, then spoke in a measured hush that made the chandeliers quiver. Full control or full exposure, Maddie. I won't curate your redemption arc. For the first time, Madison's gaze fractured, revealing the tremor beneath her empire. The declaration ignited a clandestine war that metastasized through boardrooms, ballrooms, and brokerages with the velocity of rumor and the precision of litigation. Madison mobilized her inner circle: Gareth Chen, the foundation's forensic accountant turned loyal consigliere, and Elise Ward, a public relations savant who once spun an oil spill into a corporate social responsibility case study to discredit Chelsea before she could weaponize the tape. Overnight, tabloids received leaks painting Chelsea as an embezzler from her previous NGO. Donors received anonymous dossiers questioning her mental stability. And a swarm of shell companies began shorting stocks in Hamilton's technology holdings, driving her personal liquidity into freefall. Yet Chelsea anticipated scorched earth. She had already inoculated key trustees by drip-feeding select phrases from the recording just enough to prove authenticity. Not enough to sacrifice the nuclear option, and by Thursday, the elders of the Richardson dynasty convened an emergency session, their ancestral crest trembling on mahogany as they demanded an explanation from their prodigal heiress. Madison arrived draped in ivory serenity, presenting Garrett's forensic evidence against Chelsea. But the patriarch, Senator Emeritus Everett Richardson, requested silence, pressed play on Chelsea's curated snippet, and listened to his late son-in-law's name crack beneath Madison's teenage sob. The room chilled. No vote was taken that day, but the balance shifted like a continent drifting. Trustees began scheduling private coffees with Chelsea. Lawyers whispered about fiduciary duty, and paparazzi staked out the foundation steps, sensing seismic tremors in the charitable glitterati. Madison retaliated by hunting the original analog cassette. Her operatives raided the abandoned firm only to find its fireproof cabinets gutted. The physical evidence ghosted away to a vault in Liechtenstein. In parallel, she filed an injunction claiming the tape was fabricated, yet Chelsea's tech allies countered with metadata forensics proving the recording's age and unbroken chain of custody. The legal jest clogged federal dockets even as Madison, cornered, commissioned a shadow team led by Vincent Moreau, a crisis manager whose resume read like a classified annex to retrieve every copy by force or fraud. Chelsea, sensing the tightening noose, retreated to a penthouse war room lined with redundant servers, biometric safes, and a cadre of ethical hackers who uploaded the file to a dead man's switch cloud. Any breach of her biometric signature would send the confession streaming to 300 journalists and a blockchain ledger immune to court orders. With mutual annihilation assured, the conflict shifted from covert strikes to psychological siege. Madison orchestrated a charity gala celebrating her father's philanthropic tenure, framing it as a memorial rebirth and daring Chelsea to detonate the tape amid an audience of heads of state and Hollywood titans. Invitations embossed in platinum ink hinted at Madison's gamble that Chelsea lacked the cold fury to collapse a ballroom of innocence merely to secure a throne. Chelsea RSVPDS. The night rose on a silver crescent moon, paparazzi flashes strobing against Versailles-sized doors, and within the crystal menagerie of the Grand Asterium, violinists threaded Vivaldi through a maze of polished marble where each statue seemed to watch for betrayal. Chelsea arrived clad in black sequins sharp as obsidian, carrying a clutch that could stream the confession worldwide with a single squeeze. Across the hall, Madison shimmered in white silk. A chessboard manifested in fabric and greeted donors with a smile so luminous photographers dimmed their strobes. Speeches unfurled, champagne cascaded. But when Madison stepped onto the dais to unveil a bronze bust of her late father, Chelsea felt the room hush as if oxygen itself braced for revelation. She moved toward the stage, heart a metronome of vengeance, but halfway there she caught Everett Richardson's eye sweat, imploring, and in that flicker Madison's younger brother, Julian, collapsed beside the sculpture, clutching his chest. The gala spiraled into chaos that smelled of adrenaline and burnt sugar. EMTs tore through designer gowns, security wrestled flash drives from trembling hands, and above the din Madison locked gazes with Chelsea, understanding that fate had engineered a reprieve neither could claim credit for. Julian survived Dundiagnos arrhythmia. The doctors said, but the incident postponed any public reckoning, buying Madison time to regroup and Chelsea time to reassess collateral damage. In the aftermath, anonymous tweets alleged that stress from Chelsea's extortion triggered Julian's collapse, while whispered leaks suggested Madison had laced her brother's wine to divert disaster. No proof surfaced, yet the board splintered anew, unsure which sister-in-law represented existential risk. Weeks stretched into a chess match of attrition. Chelsea secured a whistleblower inside Garrett's accounting web, revealing offshore accounts that funneled donor money toward hush settlements stemming from Madison's cover-up. Madison countered by exposing Chelsea's encrypted communications with a mercenary media outlet willing to fabricate scandals for equity stakes. Chelsea responded by lodging a formal motion to suspend Madison pending independent audit. Madison filed a defamation suit seeking punitive damages large enough to bankrupt every Hamilton venture. Investors wavered, journalists circled like carrion crows, and the Richardson Foundation is synonymous with altruistic magnificence became shorthand for dynastic rot. Throughout, the original cassette hovered like an exposed heart, its every hiss and pop a ticking metronome for ruin. Chelsea could vaporize Madison with a keystroke, yet she grasped that pure destruction delivered no sovereignty. Power required not only winning but inheriting the ruin intact enough to rule. Madison understood, too, that preserving her crown meant bleeding just enough to appease the board without letting the blood scent attract regulators. In clandestine midnight calls, emissaries floated settlement terms, a phased transfer of control, joint public mea culpa, a pledge to triple outreach budgets. Each proposal died on the altar of pride. Finally, as autumn smudged gold across the city skyline, Everett summoned both women to the family crypt beneath St. Agnes Cathedral, a chamber carved in alabaster, echoing with centuries of privilege, and spoke with the gravity of tombstones. And this, or I and you both. The foundation survives, egos do not. He proposed a Solomon bargain. Chelsea would assume day-to-day command as executive director, while Madison retained ceremonial presidency devoid of financial authority, contingent on a forensic audit chaired by an independent panel. Any further leaks, lawsuits, or power plays would activate an irrevocable clause transferring all assets into a public trust. In that vaulted stillness, surrounded by statues that had judged generations, Chelsea and Madison locked fingers around the pen, signing a truce inked in equal parts venom and necessity. Yet as they emerged into the cathedral's pale morning light, neither believed the war was truly over. The tape still existed, pride still burned, and the Richardson Foundation gleaming, gutted. Reborno stood as a citadel both of them ruled, yet neither could fully trust. Behind them the crypt was sealed, but the echo that followed sounded eerily like a fuse sputtering to life, reminding them that in beyond the gates, power is never ceded, only recalibrated. And the past is a predator that never stops circling the present, waiting for the next tremor of weakness to strike. Bradley Smitty Smith never set out to rip the veneer from Port Arbor's gilded society, yet the closer Thursday, June 19th crept, the faster the dominoes of denial toppled. And every new rumble shook beyond the gates to its core. What began as a dogged feature about a decorated detective's sunset years had twisted into an expose so combustible that even Smitty's own pulse could not keep pace with the truth. He was piecing together the revelation that Detective Marcel Malone kept a private berth at the same secluded yacht club that gangster in plain sight Joey Armstrong frequented might have been dismissed as coincidence in a quieter town, but Port Arbor thrived on whispered favors and blood-slicked favors owed. And when Smitty spotted Malone grinning in a decades-old snapshot behind the bar, a grin that mirrored Joey's crooked smirk only to stools away, he felt the first tremor of a catastrophe roaring up from the water like a leviathan hungry for air. It was that photograph, languidly yellowed yet viciously alive, that forced Smitty to retrace the last 5 years of Malone's tough-on-crime crusade and discover a breadcrumb trail of dismissed charges, ghost-written affidavits, and sealed depositions, each one pointing to a deal struck in smoke and signed in someone else's blood. Just as that dreadful certainty settled in his marrow, Monday, June 16th delivered a memory from Martin Richardson that stormed through town like midnight thunder. In an unguarded moment of reverie, Martin confessed to reliving a night so secret and so savage that merely summoning Malone's name sent him spiraling into a kind of living rigor mortis. The confession, half muttered and half sobbed in the dark hush of Richard Manor's library, hinted at a pact to hide a corpse that should have been allowed to condemn them both. And for Smitty, eavesdropping from a cracked, steady door confirmed more than any police ledger, more than any doctored rap sheet. Malone's badge had long been soldered to Joey's blade, and Martin's gentle society mask hid something so grim it could swallow reputations wholesale. With that chilling epiphany, Smitty realized the investigation he thought he controlled was about to pivot and consume him. Because secrets that sleep beneath silverware chandeliers do not wake up quietly. They splinter, they claw, they detonate, and they never care who gets caught in the shrapnel. Across town, Martin's sister Catherine Cott Richardson rehearsed an entirely different calculus of risk and reward. One rooted not in corruption, but in the combustible chemistry of curiosity and yearning. Tomas Tom Navarro had survived her loyalty gauntlet by meeting Eva Thomas's brazen advance with polite rejection. never suspecting that Kot was curled beneath Eva's hotel suite bed like a coiled spring, cataloging every heartbeat of the conversation while pretending to retrieve Leslie Thomas's crash course riding helmet and blood-flecked gloves evidence Kot believed would crack the Laura Peterson manslaughter wide open. Kot's eyes devoured the scene, Eva's lip-bitten audacity, Tomas's gentlemanly refusal, and the sudden flicker of regret he suppressed when Kot's perfume still lingered in the room like lightning long after a storm. That single tableau grafted itself to Kot's imagination, and now spurred by the same adrenaline that had once driven her to demolish courtroom opponents, she found herself imagining Tomas not as an ally, but as an inevitable collision. She weighed the gleam of anticipation inside him against the severity of her own expectations. Could this man who rebuffed temptation while unaware of her hidden gaze handle the wildfire of her trust once the lights were off and the walls were gone? Could he weather the emotional shrapnel that comes from betting a Richardson and waking up with every secret she carries sealed to his skin? Kot's questions forged a tension hotter than the Riviera sun. Yet beneath the fierce desire, she also recognized the shape of a potential partnership that might recalibrate both their live-a-sieve. Of course, they survived the maelstrom her brother's buried sins was about to unleash upon every branch of the Richardson dynasty. On the city's ragged edge, Naomi Hawthorne confronted a crisis that felt smaller in scale, but pulsed with equal urgency. June, her stalwart friend from the improvised tent community under the railway spur, wept because a municipal cleanup crew had bulldozed her shelter and vanished with the only possession she treasured, a grainy photograph of her children frozen forever at ages they had long since outgrown. When Naomi discovered the wreckage on Wednesday, June 18th, rage pulled in her throat like hot iron. She promised June that she would retrieve that picture if it meant sprinting through every bureaucratic corridor and every auction warehouse where the city discarded the memories of its invisible citizens. Yet as the promise escaped her lips, Naomi felt the vibration of a deeper mystery. June clutched that image not merely as a relic of maternal longing, but as a cipher to something larger. Something interlaced with the very engine that powered Port Arbor's brutal inequalities. The negative space in June's story inference that someone, somewhere, needed that photograph erased hinted there was more at stake than sentimentality. Naomi sensed a shadow network that preyed on silence, and she would not allow June to be its collateral damage. Thus the board is set, Smitty chasing a conspiracy that could incinerate faith in the badge, Martin teetering on the brink of confessing a sin so lethal it threatens to unravel the Richardson fortune, Kot testing the tensile line between trust and lust with a man who may become both sword and shield, and Naomi racing the clock to restore a single image that might reveal the city's ugliest truth. Each thread snaps in time with the others, a synchronized swell of dread climbing toward June 19th when Smitty's investigation collides headlong with Malone's double life beneath Yacht Club moonlight. When Martin's nightmare clods through silk curtains to scream. When Kot either claims Tomas in a blaze of vulnerable triumph or burns them both alive in disappointment. And when Naomi, armed with righteous fury, discovers whether the lost photograph is the key to dethroning a predator or merely the first move in a deeper game none of them yet understand. Port Arbor has always survived on the illusion that secrets can be bartered like fine wine among patrons who never break a sweat. But this week, every gorgeously wrapped deception threatens to shatter. And once glass hits marble floors, no one can warn the innocent to step aside. In the end, Beyond the Gates reminds its audience that the past is not a museum piece. It is a living beast, prowling, waiting. And when the right name is whispered, the wrong promise is Medit will pounce with a hunter's precision and a monster's appetite, devouring innocence, ambition, and love with equal devotion until the city's most gilded corridors echo with the sound of reputations bleeding out on the tiles.